I think 16 millimeters. Is that right? 16 millimeters. And he had them on 25-foot rolls. And that was his thing that he done at each reunion. He had the first time that we got a chance to get a camcorder. It was when we were in Chicago. And this guy, who's a good friend of the guy that takes film, went out and rented one, and he took that, and this guy's fumbling around, changing reels and stuff, and all of a sudden I look over the TV and go, hey, that's what we were doing this afternoon. Well, I'll tell you talk about, he was furious.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm never going to tell another damn reunion, blah, 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 blah. Because he had his nose cut off.
Yeah.
It was really, really bad.
That's too bad after he
Well, we still got him. Then he finally started splicing them. It's kind of fun to look at, but a lot of those guys, about half of our attendants now are widows of guys. You know,
the widows come even after the husband's gone?
Oh, well, yeah, they make a point to ask them.
I'm going to move this forward a little bit. If that doesn't bother you there.
It doesn't bother me.
Okay, well, what I wanted to do, like I said in my letter, just sort of informally chat about your experiences during the war. Go in any order you want, but I usually just kind of start at the beginning and kind of try and let you talk your way through it as it happened.
Yeah, well,
you can just tell me, for background first, you know, where you were born and grew up, and
right here in Isle Falls.
Okay.
I was born up at about 816 Stevens Street. My mother tells me this. Of course, I don't remember that, but I had worked on the house up there, and she wanted to know where I was working, and I told her, she said, well, you were born in that front bedroom up there. I always, family joke that I went to, we were going to make a shrine out of it, and say that Warren Kness was born here, but they decided that they could make more money renting it out another month. I graduated from high school in 1943. This will bring us up to what you're out here for, you know.
When you went to Isle Falls High School, I assume.
Yes, the one that's right at the end of Main Street. That was the school then. That was built in 1939. We were the first class to go all the way through it, the 4 years. Right after I graduated up there, the 6th day of June, I was in Williamsburg, Virginia, in boot camp. It's a CB, a naval training station for naval construction people. And the reason I went there is because I didn't know until I took my physical that I was colorblind. And the regular Navy won't take people that are colorblind. I don't know why, but they had some kind of a struggle. This guy down, I kind of had the feeling when we were at Camp Dodge that the guy thought I was trying to get out of going, and I couldn't hardly stand it. I wanted to go so bad. I thought, boy, here I go colorblind. Well, he said, why don't you go in the Seabees? I said, well, what's that? Well, he said, that's an outfit that they strap a machine gun on your back and they put a shell in your hand if you're not digging, you're fighting. I said, boy, that's for me, 17 years old. You know, you think you got most of the answers for everything. I found out, it didn't take me very long to find out how naive I was. It's the farthest I'd ever been away from home, and about 3 weeks I found out how really bad. I was up against some guys who were raised on the streets in Chicago, New York, San Francisco. In fact, when we got down to Williamsburg, there was a guy who stood right alongside of me, and we were told in advance by letter that we were to bring a change of underwear, a razor, and I wasn't even shaving yet, toothbrush, and a small amount of money, and that was it. This guy dropped his duffel bag down on the ground and it went clunk. I thought, oh boy. And the chief petty officer came by, who was in charge of all the new recruits, said, open that up. So he opened it up. He had a pair of brass knuckles in there, he had a switchblade knife, and he had a .38 police special revolver. And he says, the guy says, what in the world are you doing with that? He says, well, you told me this is the fighting outfit. He says, that's the way we fight the home. And I thought, oh boy, what a bunch of yo-yos. But the training in Virginia at Williamsburg was primarily intimidating. They try to take away your identity and make you react rather than think. When they say something, they want you to do something right now. This is a little tough on 17-year-old people. And the big deal with the Seabees that is not true in any other outfit, I was one of the babies in the outfit at 17. We had guys in there 45 years old.
Really?
All right. Well, yeah. See, this is construction people, and what the Navy done, they found out that there are a lot of islands and stuff that they took that they needed to have redone. So they found this out early on at Pearl Harbor and some other places over there where the war first started. They needed something to rebuild so they could bring men and equipment in, rebuild air bases and stuff. So they just took these guys and they just kind of looked the other way about these physical defects like my colorblindness. Not that I was experiencing construction, but they needed somebody to go along, and the group was just about half of 17, 18, 19-year-olds. The rest of them were on up. When we got in Williamsburg, Virginia, we were called the Super 7th Battalion, and there was 1,250 men in it. Well, then they decided somewhere down the line that they wanted people to maintain some of these bases that the Marines had taken, and so then they busted us down to what they call a construction battalion maintenance unit. There's 250 men in each one. So out of the battalion, they got 5 units, CBNU 520. It happened to be our numbers. We got to come home on leave for 10 days. Of course, it was from Williamsburg to Iowa Falls. It was Des Moines, and I hitchhiked up to Des Moines. But actually, I was home 6 days because there was 4 days travel time there.
By train?
And I went immediately back to Williamsburg, Virginia, and from there to Gulfport, Mississippi. And Gulfport, Mississippi was advanced training, which was hand-to-hand combat. They issued us guns, and I had a carbine. And they taught us the thing that really bothered me, and I'm glad I never had to use it, was bayonet training. Because I just couldn't feature myself doing something like this. I could shoot at somebody if they were far enough away. But as it was, they had a dummy there, and they told us, parry, that means you ward off your opponent's thrust, and you thrust. And I can still hear this guy say, turn the gun sideways so that the bayonet goes in flat, because if you do it this way, it'll stick in the rib cage. No, that's not for me. Here we are, we tell us all of our life to behave ourselves, and then this is what of course, that was when they were really crying for men. They needed a lot of them, and they needed them trained quick. So we got that, and we got gas mask training, and we crawled under live fire, on the rifle range and this kind of stuff. But I don't know, this just really, they have a tendency the recruiting officer to romanticize these things. And that's not. We trained under guys that were some of the first Marines in combat, so they knew what they were talking about and what you had to do to survive. They also issued us a knife, kind of like Jim Boyd's knife, which was meant to kill too. I mean, it was designed for that, which you carried all the time. Actually, we didn't get too concerned until we got down to Gulfport and got that all taken care of, and then we got to go to New Orleans. And fortunate for me, I was broke that night, so I didn't get to go out on Liberty. And they took the ship over to the Todd Johnson dry docks, and they painted Pacific colors, camouflage it. Mm-hmm. So I had the sensation of being picked up by those big cranes and put on the dry dock, and they painted her. And so I had that much. There was, I can't remember how. We were actually passengers on the boat. We were not crew. I can't remember now how many we had. We were on an LST, but we also had to participate in the actual functioning of the ship. We stood gun watch, we stood guard duty, we stood gangway watch, whatever they needed. And so gradually we started making our way out of there. We went from New Orleans to Panama, from Panama to, of course, Panama was a place that I really found out how green I was. Of course, we figured we were the first Navy in Panama. We weren't, but we just thought we were. And I just can't believe the lifestyle of those Panamanians. I still can't.
Poverty, you mean?
Well, that and their disregard for morals and life in general. It's just different. I mean, things like this don't go on in Isle Falls. I mean, I was, excuse me, raised here, and all those years, and I always figured that every town had 3 Negro families. Every town had at least 2 Jewish families, and I wasn't used to this ethnic thing at all. And when I have to back up a little bit, when I went from Chicago to Cleveland, I run up against this Jim Crow law, and the blacks come on the trains, and the porter come through with some help and made them all go to the back of the train, and they had zoot suits on, big hats, big chains hanging on, you know, and they come down through the vestibule of these coaches and deliberately hit you with their elbows. They were picking, trying to spawn for fight. And one time I kept my mouth shut. I know it's hard to believe, but I did. And I said, boy, I didn't want any of that. We got down there, and they were segregated in the camps too. We knew they were there, but they weren't with us. And some of them spent quite a little time in the break because of this attitude. And by break, I mean, jail. And they drilled them constantly to give them exercise. And so, but they were, a lot of them were mouthy, and they had some problems with discipline. And they were disciplined at home, and they couldn't handle someone telling them what to do and doing it. But anyway, we got underway, and we went through Panama and saw all this raw life down there and out on the other side. And we went through the chain, the island chain, and we finally ended up, we were on Guadalcanal. We went to Bora Bora and Numia, New Caledonia. Let's see, American Samoa, Fiji's, and we ended up at the canal. And I found out much later in one of our reunions, we were either going to go to the Guadalcanal or Guam, and I'm glad we got the canal because that's a far nicer place as far as scenery is concerned. And the island is 32 miles long, and it'd be like driving here to Zurich from one end to the other. And, it wasn't quite that wide, but beautiful place. However, we weren't there on a tourism deal. Our primary job was to maintain the airstrip, and we built mess halls, and we built roads, we built corduroy roads, we built bridges, we built officer quarters, and the men all slept in tents. And we finally got up out of the mud. We had government procurement. Everything belonged to Uncle Sam, so we just, when we saw something we wanted, we took it. You'd go, this was a kind of a way of life, and we could get by with it because it all belonged to Uncle Sam anyway. When we first got to the beach, the ship that was carrying all our gear had gotten torpedoed and sunk. So we didn't have anything to even get off the beach with. They set us down on the beach. We had our sea bags and stuff with us, but that's all we had. And they set us up in a camp on the beach, and gradually they gave us a place on the island where we were supposed to be, and we started scrounging lumber and getting those tents up. I put a deck in them, and went over to there was a parachute assembly outfit that dropped cargo by parachute to troops that were trapped.
So what month would this be?
Oh, we were over there in October 1943.
October 43.
Yeah, in October to the end of December, Guadalcanal was #1 war zone. Bull Halsey was right down the beach from us. In fact, one of the first details that I got was to go to Tulagi, which is about 6 miles across the water, to about go from here to Alden with a tank glider, and we cut sod over there because his personnel officer thought that he ought to have something green out in front. Can you imagine that? So we cut sod and rolled it up and put it in wheelbars and rolled it back down through that sand out onto that tank glider, and a tank glider back over the canal. And it takes about an hour to make the trip one way. And rolled all that out on the beach for Mr. Halsey. And I wrote my mother a letter, and I told her, I said, quit buying bonds. And I went on to great lengths. I said, this is what this is all about. I said, I don't want to finance it. I said, he can live in the sands. And of course, the censor just ripped that letter all to pieces. And I had a dear mom, and my mother told me all this about it in the return letter. She didn't get much information out of her son. But the censor called me in and said I wasn't to talk like that. And it wasn't patriotic, blah, 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 blah. So, and I still feel that way about it. And very shortly after that, they started moving the war zone on up through the Marianas and Caroline Island. But every morning at 5:30, they warmed those B-26s up. We were right alongside of Henderson Field, which was the place on a canal because they had enough room to have landing strips. And they'd warm those things up and nobody slept until they took off. But they were bombing Bougainville, they were bombing, let's see, I can't remember. I used to have this all memorized. All the islands up through that chain, and then just gradually pushed the Japanese all the way back to Japan. But the big battles was in Okinawa, and some of our guys, one of them in particular, went over the hill and went along with the Marines. Of course, when you get guys in uniform and battle fatigues, they all look alike. The guy knew, some of the lieutenant in this particular Marine outfit knew that he had an extra man, but he didn't question it. They need all the men they could get. But we were really out of harm's way. I never shot at anybody that I knew of, but we had constant training all the time. But it was a real good deal for us. We found out later because we had established our home there. With 2.5 years, you do pretty well.
You were there 2.5 years?
Yeah. Well, not on that island, going from here to there when we finally got back. But it was, other than there was a lot of drinking going on because the guys, that was their way to fight the loneliness and stuff. And there was a lot of boredom too. I mean, other than we had air raids and we had air raid warnings, and got some of the guys completely ignored them, because it got to the place where it was ridiculous. And we knew we were out of it then, because they weren't sent. They send reconnaissance planes over, but nothing that had any armament on them or any ammunition or bomb. But when we were #1 war zone, we had Bob Hope and Jerry Colonna and Chili Williams. We had I can't remember all of. There was some other USO shows that come over there, and we built our own theater out of coconut logs, and had our own stage and everything. And guys would come to our chow hall because, which is quite legal if you want to come in and get on the end of the line, and because we had an ice cream machine that these mechanics had made. We scavenged Japanese ships, so they blow it up in the harbor, and refrigeration off from them, and made ice cream, and I tell you, that was a luxury. We also had guys who we called sharecroppers, who sent back to the States for seeds, and the coolest it ever got over was 70 degrees, and it got up to 120 something. Grow garden year round. Just plant and harvest, plant and harvest, plant and harvest. But
So it wasn't all sand?
No. A lot of it was volcanic rock, and it's like a lot like Hawaii. We're only 10 degrees off the equator. There was a volcano. The water was coming out of it. We'd go down there and take the trucks down there and wash them, and also go swimming. just drive right down in the river with it. The Lunga, I can't remember it anymore. But I've got, we had a deal where we had the guys sent out a questionnaire to try to get the guys to respond, to do just exactly what you're doing here, only for our outfit. And some of them would absolutely no answer at all. They didn't write what they'd done, or they would say, well, you know what we've done, or why should I tell you? And just not very enthusiastic. We thought, boy, we're going to have us a nice book. This is what we ended up with right here. It's,
So,
yeah.
not all of them wanted to.
Oh no, there's not a tenth of them in there. We've had some guys that went on to be. One guy made a career out of it, and he was all over the world working naval construction. He was to the South Pole and to the North Pole, and really
got around.
Really done. He was originally from Iceland, and he got his citizenship in the United States and joined the Naval Construction Battalion in Goodmanson, and his pictures are in there. Betty, you know where Goody's book's at?
I think so, I'll go look.
Well, that won't do his video any good, but at least John can see what we were doing.
Just reading through your essay here.
Saw about ship blowing up.
No, that's something that we had there was a ship tied out about 1.5 miles. Anytime they're loading or unloading ammunition, she's out, and the queen flag's up, they call it, so that you know that there's an alert. And something happened. There were blacks driving these ducks, they call them, amphibious ducks. They were hauling aerial torpedoes out to this ship. And something happened, and it blew up. Whether they dropped one, I don't know. There was 360 some men on that ship, and one guy survived that, and the only reason he did because he was in the paint locker, which is right in the bow of the ship, and he'd done something wrong, and they didn't have a brig on the ship. Put him in there, and they blowed that front of that bow clear up on the beach, 1.5 miles, and his stuff was flying through the trees. And of course we couldn't stand it. We had to get on there and see what's going on. Guys laying around, blood running out of their ears, and from concussions. And there was a crank out of that diesel. The crankshaft was buried in the concrete down there at the fleet post office. And for 2 weeks after that, if a coconut dropped, I was up and running. But I was down in a malaria control ditch, rooting just like the hogs do, to get away from this stuff. And these blacks were across this ditch from it, and they were right down there, and there was no discrimination, or we were just scared to death, afraid we were going to get it. Well, when that stuff got done flying, it was all right, but it was real hard. There's the book I was talking about, this guy,
okay.
Goodmanson. This guy is...
he was in your unit?
Yeah. But he was a real talented guy. You wouldn't look at him, you'd think he's kind of like the Ichabod Crane type, but boy, I tell you, he was really sharp. Yeah, I've talked to him a number of times, and he's written us letters and stuff. This is the fun part about it, is the friendships we build up over here. I was in the same tent with 3 other guys for 2.5 years. I knew more about those guys than I did my own brother.
It's a long time.
You bet. And of course, all the bad habits and stuff show up too. However, these guys, well, one of them called me. He was on his way back from Arizona, and he was over here at the boondocks. And he got in that last ice storm we had, and he was driving along pretty fast. It was about 50, and he hit that, and next thing he knew, he was going backwards down the road. He went across the median and back up on the other side, run up over a post, and rattled his transmission bad. So he said there were 4 highway patrolmen. They happened to be coming along. There were 2 from one direction, 2 from the other. And he had nothing but compliments about Iowa's highway patrol. And he's from Moose Lake, Minnesota. Was one of the guys who was in the tent. But he called me, and they're going to host this year the reunion. We're going to, yeah, and we're going to be at that shop till you drop, the biggest mall.
Oh, Mega Mall, Mall
yeah,
America.
Mega Mall, which doesn't mean anything to me. The girls love this guy. And they also have this Renaissance Festival at Shakopee, which I would be more. We've been up there. We had a lot of fun up there.
Mm-hmm.
But generally now we sit around and visit. Now I'll be 70 years old pretty quick here, and I'm one of the babies. So you know when that puts the other guys. We've got guys that are 85 years old, and we don't sit up and drink all night and raise hell and dance like we used to. And the first time we hosted, I went and bought $125 worth of booze, and we had to go buy some more. Now they've got booze left over from 3 years ago. And you transport this across straight lines, which is highly illegal, but they just don't. I mean, you get to the place where they'll sit down and drink a beer or something, and we'll sing and do it. But he told me when we were sitting over there at the Boondocks, he said, we don't need to levy any fees against these guys. He said, we've got more money we need to. What they generally do is have a banquet on Saturday night, and they have tours. When Betty and I hosted it, first time we were at the Amanis, and I'll tell you, I'd recommend that to anybody for this type of a thing, because these people come in from 40 different states, and they left a lot of money in the Manor. They bought meat, they bought woolens, and we had a tour of the wineries, and just a real good time. We sat around and visit, and eat too much.
How many people show up for these?
40 out of the...
Counting the spouses?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, about half of them are with us. So those are not... I suppose maybe we might have 35 maybe veterans of that outfit. And the second time we hosted it was over at Dubuque, and we stayed at the Julian over there. And one of the last trips that just for a gambling boat went down the river, down in Missouri.
But the guys in your unit were from all over the country, weren't they?
Oh yeah, we had 38 states or something. And what they do, of course, now the older guys won't do it at all. I think next year in 1996 we'll be in Yuma, Arizona, and that'll be about the end, because we've kind of exhausted the guys who will take. And the older guys, they just don't want to be bothered with. They love to come, but we can't. Well, we could go out in Arizona or Texas or some of those places where they kind of chase the sun. A lot of them are in Florida, and they could collectively do this. I mean, what it amounts to is a lot of these motels and hotels have people who do this, set it up, your party, everything.
Yeah, take care of everything.
And take care of everything. All you got to do is get the letters out to the guys and we've got a mailing list, which we try to correct every year. But they just don't want to do it. And I can kind of understand it too.
Well, yeah.
But we've had heart attacks. We had several reunions where people died right there. And I tell you, that kind of makes you come unglued too, because the guy's wife died when we were up at Duluth, Minnesota. They pulled a trailer in up there. Can't. I'll tell you, you talk about putting a damper on a party.
Yeah.
But it's and a lot of guys just can't understand this. I talk to a lot of service guys who don't do this because nobody ever. But the deal in this. Where's my little book? Yeah, I show you this. The guy that Mr. Heitland was the one that football, the first one. They had it in Passaic, New Jersey, I think. And they didn't know where I was at because I had given my mother's address as my address. And when she was in Des Moines, she worked in Ankeny during the war in a shell loading plant there. They made 50 caliber machine gun bullets in Ankeny.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so, and then they had a guy that had a carpool. He'd haul these women up there for $1 a week. Can you imagine? This is Mr. Conlon right here. This is the executive officer, Mr. Jeffrey. Conlon was the guy, and he still comes, and he's the only officer that's ever come. The rest of them never showed any interest. The chief petty officers come, but these are guys that
the other guys are still alive but just don't come?
Well, no, Mr. Jeffries was killed in I think it was at Okinawa. He went on up with another outfit, and he took his executive officer with him, and they lost both of them.
But you spent your whole time on Guadalcanal?
Yes, other than my training periods.
And you said that it was the hot spot of the war for a while, from October to December.
2 months. And
What do you mean?
well, what I'm saying is that they were chasing the Japanese so fast that all of a sudden we were a staging area rather than being the #1 war zone. We had supply dumps, which I stood guard over, and this guy from Decorah, I stood guard over that thing at night, and fully armed and stuff, because there's a lot of valuable stuff there. And then he, every night, he always managed to drop a crate or something. You never knew what he was going to bring home, back to the tent. But I had a 38 Navy Special, which would be equivalent to what the officers carry up here now, which I didn't want around at all. But he brought, each one of us one, laid it on our bunk. I said, you know what'll happen to us? We get caught with that? We'll be in Mare Island in California for 30 years. But getting back to that, which reminds me of something else, when that ship blew up, the blacks, who were the stevedores that were hauling from shore to ship, those that survived that would not go back to work the next morning. And our skipper, Mr. Jeffries, posted on a bulletin board, those guys got 30 years apiece in Mare Island, California for insubordination. And our bulletin board was right by the chow hall. So when you walk by it, everybody got a chance to read it. And here, there's a message there for you. Very plain. You go back to work. I'll tell you, it was real spooky. And big noises still bother me. There was a lot of stuff blew up. I don't know how much, but they had all the details. Then we got to, after we got, when the war was over in Europe, they started bringing guys in over there, see, and they turned the lights on in the theater one night, and they said, hey, of course somebody thought the film had broken. They were griping about that and yelling and catcalling, and the lieutenant come on the loudspeaker, and he said that the war's over in Europe. So the routine was pretty much the same day after day. And I worked a lot in the galleys before I got my stripes. And we had an Italian cook. And he tried his darndest to make that food good. After we started getting some decent food, we started getting some fresh eggs and stuff like that. Why, he could bake, he could cook like food. We had ice cream, but he would send me down the supply dump with a truck, and we had New Zealanders, Australians, and there were some English on the island. All drawed supplies out of the same place. So I got on first name basis with these New Zealanders and an Australian, and they were raised on mutton. And so I would start trading mutton, because our guys, there's no way that Grigas could fix that mutton. Those guys couldn't tell what it was, and they refused it. They wouldn't eat it. So then I thought, well, hey, those guys like mutton, and they would get beef. You get a ration, so much beef, so much whatever, and so when we started swapping, and then that made a nice deal. Then of course, again, the other Americans on the island, and particularly the Seabees and regular Navy, would come off the ship and come eat with, because their job was better there. Well,
you trade you trade mutton for beef.
That's right. Yeah, and we were getting the big end of the deal there, because the beef weighed more than the mutton. I could carry a half a carcass of mutton real easy. Slippery, slimy, no self-respecting Billy Goat would smell like it. Oh, that stuff was terrible. Well, one of our Christmas dinners he was telling about, they had, I don't know whether we'll look at that after we get done with this deal here, but they had baby lamb. Well, it wasn't baby lamb at all, but they tried, to fix us up. They had some gals come down one time from, we cleaned the mess hall up, and come down from the Naval Hospital on the canal. I think they called it Mob 8, somewhere, the mobile, I don't know what now, but nurses, and all of them were at least a lieutenant. And some of those guys really thought that was neat. They were doing something for the boys. You hear you're dancing with an officer. I was a little bitter about that, but it was nice. But the fun we had was Eddie Peabody was over there too, the banjo player,
Okay.
nationally known or internationally known. And they tried their darndest to make it, but it still wasn't home. I always figured anybody like service didn't have a home at home because it was. They tell you what time to get up. They tell you when you're going to eat. They tell you when you go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
When you better be getting done. That's another job I had that I hated. We had outhouses. We had sled trenches at first. Then we put built regular outhouses and had 8-holer for our outfit. And my job in the morning was after all the guys went to work, was to burn the paper out of that and put lime in it to keep it from smelling. A lot of nitty-gritty stuff. We screened coral for airstrips. What we do is they'd harvest that coral, which is illegal now. They take those drag lines. They swing that bucket out over the ocean and they drag it back across that reef and pick that live coral up and dump it in a truck. They take it down and then they'd roll it and crush it. Then they put salt water on it. It was just like concrete. They bring it in. And we built. One thing we did do, we built an airstrip that put the first B-29s that come over there and landed at the canal. I try to remember how long that airstrip was. They didn't have much room when they got done, but just shy of 5 miles. Be from here to Albany to bring those things in. Of course, they had to have, and boy, that was really.
It's a big plane that needed a lot of
Yeah,
room.
well, they did. Yeah, when they were awkward. But they were big bombers, and they were getting ready to take Tokyo right out, so they were getting ready to do with them. And,
Well, what, the planes that took off from Guadalcanal, what were their targets? Where-
target was Bougainville. They bombed Tinian, Saipan, all those. There's an island chain that goes right. I'm not that familiar with geography to tell you just exactly, but there's a whole train of islands that the Japanese control. Well, the 20% height, 20/20 hindsight we got, what they should have done was circle around them and left the Japanese set there. But we lost a lot of men. Of course, again, there were those who tried to get them to do that. No way, they were going to take them out. They were going to clean them all out. And some of them, they dug them out with shovels, out of their bunkers and stuff.
I've always wondered too why they had to take all those little islands, but I've been told it's because the range of the bombers was only so far,
Yeah.
and they had to get certain islands to put in airstrips,
Yeah,
so they could get closer to the home islands of
Yeah.
Japan.
and but there were a lot of those islands were Iwo Jima was one. We lost several boys and off home in Iwo Jima. Nothing but a great big ash pile off of the volcanoes. And I think I forget how many men they lost there. It was terrible. They went in there on.
From Iowa Falls?
Yeah, you remember Harold Marsh? In the body shop down here for a while. His brother was killed on Iwo Jima, Easter morning. But of course, again, this is hindsight. See, at the time, all you can do is just get rid of them. But
Well, Guadalcanal was reclaimed from the Japanese too.
that's right. We lost.
How long was it after it was reclaimed that you got there?
Oh, I can't tell you that exactly. But they were on there. The 3rd Marines were on there probably a year before we got there. And we were not in the combat of it. I mean, they took the island and secured it, meaning they cleaned up the pockets of resistance and stuff. They buried the Japanese, and some of them went up in the hills. They were up there for a long time. Some of them, they didn't come to our chow hall, but some of them, they even went to eat some of the, they steal clothes off the line at night. See, we didn't do our own laundry, and then they.
Who would steal them?
The Japanese would. They
Really?
put them on. Well, I don't know but they were starving to death. They didn't come into our camps because we were right down on the beach, but back up in the hills. And they captured some of them. I can't. Again, you're talking about over 50 years ago, man. My memory is fuzzy. But some of the Seabees captured them. And then they put them in the brig and stood guard over, and they were prisoners of war. And they lied to these people. See, they told them, their officers and their powers told them that they were on the coast of California. Well, you know how far they were from California. But you see, this is the way this deceit kept them going.
They thought they were in California.
Absolutely. Yeah, they interrogated them. But we didn't get a whole, and a fine example of how they handled things, Eleanor Roosevelt come over, and immediately we had to start camouflaging our camp, because the guys, you want to shower, you just walk down the street, there's nobody around, except the guys in your outfit, and they'd seen your bare hind end before, and all of a sudden we had to make this camp secure, so when she come to visit, she wouldn't see these ugly American boys. She got up there and made remarks to the effect that we weren't, the way we were living, we weren't fit to walk down the street with a decent American girl. Well, now, wait just a minute here. Well, I don't recall, these guys didn't ask to go, a lot of them didn't ask to go there. I did. I mean, I volunteered, but a lot of them didn't. They waited till they were drafted and went, but that's still out of place. But she was lecturing instead of telling them what a good job they were doing. And when she went by our camp, she went, whoosh, never looked right nor left. But that's fine.
That wasn't very good for morale, was it?
Well, no. Of course, the guys, they pretty mean-mouthed about all that stuff. And in fact, when we come back from overseas, we had to go through about 4 or 5 hours of trying to deprogram it so we clean our talk up. Oh, it was terrible. They said, you remember, you're not where you were before. You say anything you wanted to, and a lot of them did, myself included. But
well, when Guadalcanal was the hot war zone, you mean there were a lot of bombers taking off from there?
Absolutely, every day. And they had aircraft carriers out in the bay, and they had those gull-winged Corsairs on them, and the wings fold up like this on top. And then when they get ready, they'll come down. They're hydraulically controlled. They'd bring them in there and rebuild them and refuel, and then they'd take off on them. We had aircraft carriers. We had PT boats in there in the bay right alongside of them. I could look right out of my tent and see the PT boats. They were. We didn't see the 109 that John Kennedy was on, but we had a lot of them, and they would run those things all the time in and out of their service. And sometimes they'd come back with holes in them because they didn't have any armament on them at all.
It was plywood, weren't they?
That's right. And the reason they done that was for speed. They had those big Chrysler Marine engines in them, and boy, they could move.
They had to be light and fast.
Well, yeah, they could run about 45, 50 mile an hour, which is pretty fast on the water.
Yeah. I'm going to change the battery here.
The boys done some fishing with hand grenades and this kind of stuff. You see, how many did you throw in there? Well, I think it was 9. What do you mean you think it was 9? And then what we do, we block off these little pockets of water that come in off the ocean and build a dam there so the fish couldn't get through there, and then throw these hand grenades in there. And then when the concussion, then you get down there and you're clear up to your neck and feel along with your feet and your hands. There were a lot of king mackerel. That was a beautiful fish, kind of a bluish fish. And we'd fry them right on the beach. But we got collared on that too. You're supposed to not be taking stuff out of the ammunition dumps.
They frowned on that, huh?
Yeah, but there was all kinds of fruit over there. Indian mangoes, pawpaw. Natives existed over there for years before we ever come. One thing we did do, is, speaking about crops, there was row upon row upon row of coconut palms. And I thought, gee, they sure grow nice. Well, they were deliberately planted that way. They had groves and they were harvested by the Colgate Palmolive Peat Company,
Oh, yeah.
okay, for the coconut oil. And of course, we went in there and we built these airstrips and roads and cut down their trees, and then the government had to pay Colgate Palmolive Peat so much a tree. I thought, well, this is a little ungrateful. They went there and took that place away from the Japanese. They had nothing, and at least we got part of it back for them. And this kind of stuff. And then you go through the deprogramming process after the war was over with. We started tearing stuff back down again that we built. I wanted this kid, his grandpa many times over now, but anyway, his job was to destroy the motor pool. And he would take these trucks, GMC trucks, international trucks, out about 4 or 5 miles on these tank lighters. And then they would start them up and drop them off in the ocean. We'd throw away airplane engines that were still in their overseas wrap. Kind of like it was gasoline on the guns, but the airplane engines were wrapped with a kind of an oily packaging material like maybe cheesecloth, that type, to keep the engines from rusting. And we got all that done, and we got down to the second day of September, which I'll always remember, 1945, which is the day they signed the peace treaty on Mr. MacArthur and the admiral from Japan on the USS Missouri, and that's the same day we started for home. And we had the Seabees had to fix the ship, the boiler on the ship, so we'd come home. Of course, they worked all night long. They wanted to get out of it. They had some leaks and stuff, but we stopped. It took us 110 days to get over there, and we were back here in 19. Of course, and they stopped and picked some guys up. But there's one guy aboard there, I'll always remember him. They had 6 Japanese dogs on there, and he had a monkey. He's going to take these pets home. And this monkey was a thief. Anything that was shiny, he stole. And everybody was smoking back then. And Zippo lighters was a collector's item. And all of a sudden, you'd be missing your cigarette lighter and get out. And the bunks were 7 high in this troop ship. And his was about 5th up. And underneath his pillow or his mattress, this monkey would stash all this stuff away. And I said, you keep that stinking so-and-so away from me. I said, I'll give him the deep 6, I'll baptize him in the ocean, you'll never see him again. This guy had gold in his teeth. And he let that monkey stick his dirty hands in his mouth. Well, then when we got to San Francisco, they quarantined him and the dogs and the monkey. And I sure got that. We had a anchor drop, they call it. And we had a pool going on the exact time that we would get to San Francisco, and everybody kicked in money on that. And, it was 4:03 in the morning, whatever day it was, I don't remember. Some guy walked off the ship there with several $1,000. And he had a black commissary steward there to cook for the officers. I can still see his white jacket. He had pockets in it, and he had money in all the pockets. I still think that the officers underwrote him. And he was throwing those dice, crapshooters, would throw those dice probably 15 feet against a steel bulkhead and beating the boys bad. And if some guy come up there, he laid down $400. He said, "How you got, boy?" And whew, it was gone, just like that. I said, "No thanks." But I left my pay on the books. When I drawed my pay off the books, I had $854. And they give me 8 $100 bills and a $50 bill and 2 2s. I'll never forget that. Most money I've ever had in my life. But I just, and I was sending money home to my mother out of an allotment too out of that. So I wasn't drawing very much money. I think my overseas pay was $90 a month, 91, and they took $25 out for her, and which she put in the bank. And when I come home, she and I marched up to the savings and loan, which is right in there, right next to that Bible thing there on Stephen Street. The savings loan was in there, and laid our money down. there was an $800 mortgage on the house, and it was gone. That was the nicest thing that ever happened to me. $842. It was ours. See, my dad died when I was 15, so my mother had to sign for me to get me the service. She was a sole parent, and I was a minor. She knew I was going to go anyway, so there was a few tears shed, but we got her done. But it's real, and it seems like another lifetime now. It's hard for me to recall the stuff. When I'm around those guys talking to them, all of a sudden one of them will say something. Do you remember? Yeah. And it all comes back. But, we crossed the equator, Christmas Day, 1943. They have what they call the Order of the Shellbacks, which is guys who cross the, and they put you through an initiation. The regular crew administered, they had a gauntlet you run through, and they just spread their legs apart, and you had to crawl on your hands and knees through this gauntlet. And those guys had some of those Zippo lighters in there, and had and beat you so you'd really move. And boy, I tell you, that hurt. And you got up there, and the skipper of the ship was King Neptune. And they had a bunch of charges that they brought against me because I was one of the mouthy ones on the passengers. And the skipper had a wire-haired terrier dog. And they let you see this dog. And then they blindfolded you. And then they held that dog right down to your face so you could smell it. And they poured some evil-smelling stuff. You didn't know what you thought the dog was doing to you. And I come off there up fighting, and I had 4 guys hold me down. I still got away from them. And I pled guilty to the charges, so they let me go. Well, then on top of this, LST was an LCI, which is Landing Craft Infantry, which is a smaller ship that they could take fewer men in quicker. And I got up on that, and they had fire equipment up on that, and because the ship was all, we had fire drills every day. But I hooked the hose all up, and I was going to drown them. And the bosun's mate come up behind me, and I was going to be in the brig, and he shut the water off on me, and I started cooling off. Boy, they really harassed. Well, I've still got the diploma downstairs. They gave us across the equator. But the only way you ever get back is if you ever cross the equator, and I can prove that I have done it, then I get to sit in on the court. But it was a good experience. I mean, a lot of places I never would have been otherwise, and I think probably any ex-serviceman would tell you the same thing. I sure didn't like a lot what happened.
Was there a lot of celebrating when you heard that the bomb had been dropped in Japan?
Oh yeah, and then of course you got a little queasy about that too. However, we were weighing, of course this is rationalizing, what it would have cost in American lives and Japanese lives to go in there and take those islands, or the island, the main one, as opposed to the people they killed in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And they called Harry Truman and everything in the book, but I still think it was the right decision, in spite of the fact that, and we've got, had a lot of atrocities on both sides. We have a lot of photographs of what they've done to our boys and vice versa. So,
was there any of that on Guadalcanal?
yeah, these are photographs that I didn't take, but I had access to. And they went through the camps, which didn't help the Japanese cause any. And a lot of it was propaganda, but things that they had done. And our guys done the same thing. And the Marines went in to take these bunkers. Those guys had hole up in there and had slits to fire the machine guns on it. And they had an air hole in there and take a 5-gallon can of gas off their Jeep and pour it down the hole and light it. Well, either they come out or they burn to death. A lot of this going on. So, I mean, this is the inhumanity of war. War is not glorious, and war, because we, like I said before, we were out of harm's way because somebody else had plowed the furrow for us. Because we could have well been into it too. We were just a matter of months from being into it, a couple months. A lot of boys died, a lot of boys still over there. Their parents didn't want them to come back. We could leave them rest where they would die. There's beautiful cemeteries over there. If the cemetery can be built, row on row of white crosses, well cared for. But now I'll tell you somebody else, a celebrity was over there. It was a radio announcer, was Jack Parr.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was with the Mosquito Network. And first time I saw him on television, I said, Betty, I said, that guy was on the canal with us. And he was. And he went back. Of course, he had the money to do it. And he come on the show and he said, don't go back. He said, it ain't the same. Basically got a motel on there now, and it's just tourist things. And one time we were going to hold our reunion over there. $2,000 a head to get over there. And we changed our mind about that. Some of the guys could well have done it because they made some money, but it wasn't Kness.
Long ways over there.
Oh, well, that's 10,000 miles.
Yeah.
Took us 110 days to get over there.
So, when you got to Guadalcanal, it was basically a place for airstrips to send bombers towards the other islands
That's
and
right.
other places. Were the Japanese still in your area at all, or
Well, there were none that we saw, but they were.
how about planes?
No. Well, recon. They'd fly over once
Just
in a
the
while.
recon planes?
Snooping, and they didn't even bother to chase them because they were busy doing something else. But they had. It was the beginning of the end for them. See, they bombed Pearl Harbor on Sunday, the 7th day of December, 1941. And see, we were just short of being 2 years later into that area. So they were already starting this big, that old juggernaut was rolling. And once they got it all coordinated, Halsey was kind of a renegade. He done things, he cornered them at one of the bays, and he blowed 7 of them out of the water. So he shortcut it.
Seven ships.
He didn't do it according to the rules. Standard operational procedure. He shortcut and he caught him flat-footed. Of course, we got a place. The United States got a place not too far from where we were at. They call Iron Bottom Bay. That there's 6 or 7 of our ships on the bottom too. See, so Frank Kiss from he's a Hungarian kid, and I stood gun watch one night. And we were on from 12 to 4, and the forward gun tub. And we could talk, but you couldn't smoke or anything because of the blackouts. And he had the headset on, and of course the bridge had checked with you once in a while to make sure you were awake. And all of a sudden, something come up out of the water, and we were watching. Porpoise were swimming alongside. See, we were in an 8-knot convoy because we were the slowest ship in the whole convoy. And this submarine surfaced, apparently to recharge batteries. But of course, there's no way submarine. Who's it belong to? He let a yell out of him, and they sounded the general quarters. And of course, the time we got our hind end in gear, this guy was long gone. There was 8 of us, 8 ships in the convoy. And, he could have shot us right out of the water.
So it was Japanese?
Well, we don't know. I mean, the submarine is a submarine. They all glide that time of the night, and there's no identification on it. But he didn't miss us very far, maybe 50 feet. Oh, you talk about weird. And there's this kind of stuff. By that time, I was 18 years old. Is this 18-year-old exposed to this kind of stuff? Yeah, it's just
rough.
Well, your judgment is lousy. I mean, you don't think straight enough to be able to do this kind of stuff. But they put those up there who they had, whoever was available with.
Pretty responsible position for such a young guy.
Yeah.
Did you have any friends that didn't make it back?
No, they all got back. We had one guy that jumped over the side and started swimming. He had enough of this stuff, and they took him away. Mental hospital. We had a guy that got down to Panama, and I'm telling you, he was green, color, greenish, because he had got seasick, and we were 8 days getting into Panama out of Gulfport, Mississippi, or out of New Orleans, and he never stopped throwing up. And we were out one Sunday, of course, and we had a Baptist preacher on there, or he thought he was, and he had kind of a bland service, and he had an altar call, and this guy come forward, and I can still see him, Justice, and he shook his hands and talked to him, and you feel better now. And it wasn't but about 20 minutes, and he was back down in his bunk again. They took him off, and when we got to Panama, put him in a naval hospital down there. And he says, if my wife's ever going to see me again, she's going to come down here, so I'll never get on another ship, ever. I don't know if he ever did or not, how he got out of it. These are the kind of things you wonder about.
Yeah.
But no, we never lost anybody.
How
We had
about,
guys had appendectomies, and they had guys broken arms, and they had a guy that got hit in the head with we had a guy got hit in the head with one of those hooks on a boom, and another guy had a camp stove blow up on him and burn all his hair off, and he had to have skin graft. But this is run-of-the-mill maintenance accident. Nothing war related ammunition.
how about friends that you had here in Allen Falls, people you knew that didn't come back?
Oh yeah, we had this Bill Peavy. I knew him. He's the one that named this American Legion post up there. Bill Peavy.
How was he killed?
Yeah, we lost a lot of guys.
How was Peavy killed?
He was hit. He got a ship shot out from underneath him, I think. We had a guy here that was Melford Forsman that was prisoner of war of the Japanese for over 4 years, I think 3 or 4 years.
I was just talking to Dara Roberts today about him.
Yeah, and Dara had a lot of interesting experiences. Dara ferried planes, all kinds of planes over. And he'd bring him back, he'd fly some more back over. But I can't remember now, we've got a lot of Blue Star mothers around here, well, they're not around anymore because they're gone too, but I can't remember what the count was on them, but they've got a list of everybody was killed.
Explain what a Blue Star mother is.
Well, Blue Star, during the war, see if I got my colors right here, Blue Star, must be Gold Star mother. Everybody put a little flag in their window if they had a serviceman in the service. Some of them had 2 or 3. So they had 2 or 3 flags. But I think it's Gold Star Mother was one that lost the boy. But we had Jonas Mulford and Donald Smith. These were airplane deals. We had guys who were prisoners. My cousin was a prisoner of war for 19 months. He was in Stalag 17, I think. He was captured at Salerno, Italy. And this is Clark's twin brother, Don Clark's twin brother.
Oh, okay.
And they fed him sawdust bread and all this, just starved him to death. But he said they worked for, he said when they interrogated him, he said he got smart real quick. The skipper, their sergeant told me, he said, they're going to get us, boys, they got us surrounded. So, you bury everything that might give away outfit positions or anything like that. And they took these guys down there and they interrogated them, and they had a German officer and an Italian officer who could speak perfect English. And, they asked the guy ahead if he had any cigarettes, and no, he didn't. This guy had shoved his cigarettes in his fatigues, And of course, they searched him, and they did breathe hell. They took his cigarettes, and they found him breathe hell out of him beside. When Clark got up there, he says, I got 2 packages. He learned fast. And so they took one and gave him one back. Well, the entire time he was a prisoner, they were trying to build a railroad out of there that the Americans had bombed wherever this camp was at. And he said they'd get about a mile built. He said the Americans come in and blow it up, and they right. But he said one morning, he said he got up, they usually got up about 5:30, and he got up and something was wrong, he could just sense it. I said, well, what was the matter with it? He said it was too quiet. I went out there and the gates were wide open. And there was two old German guys there who would be, well, one of my ages now, and were taking care of them. They were in charge of the tools, this kind of stuff. And he said, when the Ruskies come, you tell us how good we were to you. Well, and Clark said, I didn't want to say about that. You know, get those guys in trouble because they're afraid the Russians would butcher it, which they probably wouldn't. And another side to this, I worked for a guy for 9 years when I first came home that liberated the death camps. And he drove a half-track. And a real good friend of Wayne Masters. And he had a general along with him, and the reason he had a general along with him was because he had the only radio communication. And he said, they drove right into these places and where the ovens were at and these people were laying around. And he said, all of a sudden, he said, the hair started coming up on the back of his neck, and over the hill come about 15,000 German soldiers. And he said, they had their hands on their head like this, and they had enough of this stuff. And he said, they could have eaten us alive. But you don't want to ever tell him that there was no Holocaust. There's a lot of guys, go out to anybody who talks like that are absolute idiots. Because I think every year we ought to be reminded of how inhumane man can be to man. I don't care, German, black, Greek, whatever, how they can possibly do this to people. But he had pictures of it, and he said he got sick to his stomach. He just couldn't help himself because of the stench and just the idea of this thing. But the general got on the radio and they brought some reinforcements in. But he said those guys had just literally kicked them to pieces. But they had, and he said a lot of them were young kids. He said young, 14, 15 years old. But they just laid their guns down and that was it. We don't want more of this stuff.
So this was a concentration camp for Jews?
Yeah, and then they were destroying them. You know, they were burning them up and starving them to death. Whatever, I mean, they tell them they were going to go take a shower and they put them in the gas chambers. And but
you don't know which one it was that he was at?
I can't tell you that, no.
And this was Don Clark's brother?
No. Well, he was.
This is your boss that was that.
Yeah, Maynard Haydock was the guy that was. I'm just. All these ideas are coming back to me now, you know. But we used to sit around and talk about this kind of stuff. And pretty soon, you know, it gets to be old hat. You just get tired of talking about it. They had a lot of, they tried to form some deals here, you know, the guys just weren't interested. To get back to the previous, anybody liked service didn't have much on. They just had their belly full of it. And we were fortunate. A lot of guys got hurt, a lot of them got sick. A lot of them some of our guys got malaria. But we were quite fortunate. And it wasn't by design, it just happened to be the way the wheel turned at that time.
You had some interesting experiences, and yet you weren't directly in the line of fire.
That's right. We were in more danger coming and going than we were when we got there.
From ships, like from
Japanese submarines,
ships?
There's a guy that lives down in Florida that when we got aboard this ship, the navigator couldn't even navigate, so he navigated us down through there, and the radar picked up the submarines, and they followed us for miles and miles and miles, days and days. But he went down along the coast of South America and took an indirect course and got clear away from to distract these subs. And eventually they eluded them. They got tired of chasing them. But we weren't moving that fast. But and all these things come out at these reunions, different little things that happen, and here we were with these same guys all this time, but each one had a different outlook and experience.
And you say you are gonna have a reunion this year?
Yeah, we'll be at,
That's up in Minnesota.
yeah, we'll be at,
So it'll be kind of a special one because of the 50 years, or?
I don't think so. It's our, I think it's our 35th reunion. I know that. But, nothing really special about it, no.
So you meet every year? Or every 2
Well,
years?
after, when they finally got going, yeah, we didn't meet every year right after the war was over with, but the first they've had 35 of them in a row.
Okay, so you waited about 15 years after the war. before
Well,
you
I
did
would
it.
presume that's mathematically, that would be about right.
The weather was probably pretty mild there, wasn't it? You said it never got below 70?
That's right.
Did you ever have like typhoons or rainy
Oh, yeah,
season or anything
yeah,
like that?
We had that, you bet. When we were going over there, we were in a typhoon, and the skipper headed that ship into the wind, and they had 2 engines on it, and the starboard one was going full speed astern, and this one was going full speed ahead just to hold her into the wind. And we woke up the next morning, and there wasn't a convoy in sight. We were sitting all by ourselves.
All alone?
So they had to break radio silence, and we're blowing 60 miles off course. That's how hard that wind was blowing. And the waves were coming clear over the top of the conning tower on that ship. And the conning tower is about 24 foot from the deck, the top to the conning tower. And I stuck my head out there just once and looked. And I thought, Lord, you get me through this, I'm going to improve. Oh, but yeah, that old ship would go just like this. She was snaking. And I'm glad, I always was going to go into Evansville, Indiana, and kiss all those lady welders in there that put that thing together, because she sure took a beating. We had guys, I think that story's in there, that we had 5,600 barrels of emulsified asphalt on there to build airstrips with. And those things started rolling. And the skipper had, now this is the actual skipper of the ship, not our skipper, had these 2 guys. They were both coxswains, which is just below bosun's mate. And he had each of them write a letter home. And then he sent them down into the hold with a lantern and wedges, and they started driving in between those barrels. Now they were walking on them too. So if they could fallen down in there, they'd have been crushed, because a 55-gallon drum of asphalt, well, you've seen gasoline barrels, probably weighed about 400 pounds. And they would come clattering across that. There wasn't a whole lot of give there, but my bunk was right alongside that tank deck. And see, LST is a landing ship tank.
Tanks.
Well, instead of having a tank on it, we had this asphalt.
Okay.
That was our cargo. And they'd hit that thing, and then she'd roll the other way, and they'd hit the guys on the other side. And pretty soon, they got her all calmed down, and they drove enough wedges down. But down there, and walking around on top of those slippery barrels, driving those wedges in to hold those, and finally they got them stopped.
That's a dangerous duty without any glory, isn't it?
Yeah. And he advanced them 1 rank, which I thought was kind of neat, but they earned it, every bit of it. They were then bosun mate 3rd class.
Anything else that comes to mind about your time over there? in the
No,
service?
not really. I'd like to go back sometime, if I could come back as soon as I wanted to.
Yeah.
But, of course, again, this tourism thing, see, there's enough money in the world that people go see these places, and the Americans, the ugly Americans, are great for this, and Japanese are too, spoiling things by, well, they overdo our national parks and these war sites, and even we had a reunion in Springfield, Illinois, a year ago, and we were down there. We got in Lincoln Country, and you can't believe the stuff that people do to these places. These are national monuments, and they scratch their initials on them, and just a bunch of pigs. And you like to break their fingers for doing it. This is hallowed ground, and a lot of boys died there. But of course, we were looking for Iowa, and Iowa wasn't at Gettysburg. You know, when the battle, I'm mixed up with Pennsylvania now. We've been around so many places, but Iowa was at Shiloh.
Right.
You know, and
Yeah,
Her-
then down to Vicksburg.
Her
later.
her grandfather, brother, great-grandfather's brother died at Shiloh. His name's on that monument down in Eldora.
Is that right?
Yeah, Stilcher,
Really?
Billy Stilcher. We got a picture of him.
I think a lot of the Iowa units were in the siege of Vicksburg
Yeah,
when the Gettysburg was going on.
but this one, and then one state tries to outdo the other one, the one that's got enough money, but it was real interesting. Bring tears to your eyes just thinking about some of this stuff.
Hmm.
And of course, we got to see the battle lines drawn, and they had a board that you set out and you witnessed all this.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I've seen that too.
But again, if it worked for the service life, we would probably not have any reason to go there unless somebody invited us. The only place that we haven't been since we've been having these reunions is in East Coast, north of Virginia, up in that area, Maryland, Washington, New York.
Hmm.
And they did have one in Gloucester, Massachusetts, but that's when they wasn't able to find me. I get a letter every year and come back, move, left no address, or address the unknown, or whatever endorsement they put on it. So I didn't get it, but they said that was one of the most expensive, but they took them out on the lobster boats. And they really had a time.
Sounds
Caught
like
their own stuff and ate it. You know,
Sounds great.
But it's fun. It is fun. And you expect to spend a little more money. When we had them down at the Amandas, we had this guy who was from Topeka, Kansas, and he is a glutton. Great big guy. And this little gal, the waitress down there, I think we were Zubers or the Hawk Show, one of the two. This regular Iowa dinner, you know, sauerkraut, and Iowa grown hams, and Iowa grown or made homemade cottage cheese. And she had come out, and there was 4 of us sitting there, no, 8 of us sitting at the table, and she had enough cottage cheese in his bowl for 8 of us. He just took this stuff, dumped it on his plate, and she looked at me, and I looked at her, and she winked. She said, "I'll put him under the table." And boy, she really stuffed him. God, but he thought that was the greatest place in the world. I never could eat like that. Even when I was 19, I couldn't eat like that. But he could just really, and he enjoyed it. That was his thing.
Didn't make him sick or anything.
No.
I mean, he's a big guy, I assume.
No, he was. Yeah, he was a mail carrier too, out of Topeka, a foot carrier. But he just had a big prodigious appetite. But I suppose he probably weighed 285, 90 pounds. Over there. Yeah. Not fat, but just big.
Mm-hmm.
Just big.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've seen Doc Brewer eat like this too.
Oh, really?
And Jack Jaden, you know, I just can't do it. And I don't envy them because they can, but I've never been able to eat. I can get it down, but I sure wish I had that. You know,
Jack Jaden was a veteran of World War II, too, right?
who?
Jack Jaden.
Oh yeah, he was in the Navy.
Yeah. Let me see if I can
Yeah,
find
there's a
it.
whole bunch of us right in that. See, he graduated a year ahead of me. They started picking up boys here in 1940. They took the Iowa National Guard, and they were the nucleus for the Red Bull Division. Harry Lown was in that, Burl Jones, Ray Day. See, all these guys are enough older than I am, but I was still in high school when it started. And of course, the only thing I could think of was how many papers I was going to sell that Sunday that they put an extra out on the 7th of December. Now, that's the way your mind goes on these things. And then the next spring we was going to quit school, and my mother said, "No, you're not." And we stayed in until graduation in 43.
Okay, well, anything else you can think of?
No, I'm probably after you go home, I'll think of another neat story today. We got to keep them air conditioned, you know.
No, I really appreciate it.
One thing was really funny. We haven't seen very many women other than those nurses, and we got to the docks, to unload our gear. And there's a little gal who was just about as wide as that door and maybe 5 foot tall, was driving this semi, because a lot of women done that because all the guys were gone. And they whistled and catcalled her, and boy, she'd worked for nothing. She was having. And one other thing that occurred to me, we went right by Alcatraz coming in, and the prisoners there had planted flowers that read, "Welcome home, well done." And they were white against a green background, and they had a boat come out, a little tugboat, and they had a band on there, and they played all the current music, and we sang and yelled and whistled, and but that was really exciting. And we went through this debriefing on the swearing and the naughty words, and in 48 hours I was on my way back to Isle Falls for a 34-day leave, rehabilitation leave. Then I went back to Hueneme, California, and checked in at the hospital there, the dispensary, and then I went from there to Long Beach, and Long Beach for 110 days. I come home, hurt my back, fell, and so this was all.
So then you were out of the service.
Yeah, I got out in January 46. I was home, and I went to work for Borden, I think in May of 46. No, May, yeah, somewhere along there.
Borden Dairy?
Borden Ice Cream.
Mm-hmm.
Drove with them 9 years, then went to work for Uncle Sam. That's only
Post office.
2 jobs, 40 years, 41 years.
A long time.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's the ice cream route paid better money, but before I got the longevity in there, but you get the money about half the time. That's the difference.
Yeah.
And I wasn't worried about competition stealing my customers and arguing with the Hadley guy over at Ackley, and, this kind of stuff. I used to go to their old Charlie Ross drugstore and park the truck there, and the guy that was mayor over there.
Otis Rule?
Oh, God, he come up there, I blasted down, what, cigarette holder, and you can't park there. I said, well, I'm sorry, sir, I got to park someplace. Well, he said, you should be pulled up a little bit farther, so I pulled up a little bit farther. He said, would you like to go down and get a ticket? And I said, no, I don't want to get a ticket. So I pulled up a little bit farther. Well, then when I pull up, I go right straight north of Ross. I service Bob Priest and Ross Drug. And go up to that alley, then I go real slow by Hadley's. Let them see that Borden truck. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my old stomping ground.
Yeah. They sold a lot of stuff over there. Old Charlie Rock had a fountain in there, and I'd go in there. I think I was going in Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and I'd take in probably 20 gallons of vanilla alone. And since they make malted milks, and then they had 2 or 3 flavors, and they sold frost sticks and popsicles and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, I used to go in there as a kid.
Yeah.
With the phosphates and things.
Oh yeah. But it was.
That was my source for comic books.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I spent a lot of time in the Princess when I had money. Bought things in there. When I was going to school, that was a place for all high school kids.
Mm-hmm. Okay, anything else? Well, that's very good, very interesting.
Well,
really appreciate it.
If those guys were sitting around, 2 or 3 of them that knew me real well, and they could prompt me and probably tell you some stuff that wasn't so too, we were in the, trying to remember where we were at. Yeah, it was down at the Amandas, because I hired this, went in and had one of these hostesses do all the legwork on who we got to correspond with, and deciding on the meals and stuff. And I said, well, we need a band. And she said, we got 2 real good ones down here. And so she gave me this guy's name. She says, I think this would be the better one for you. So I wrote this guy a letter, and Didn't hear anything out of me. And pretty soon here come a letter from Des Moines. And 2 pages. And he said, we'll be glad to play for you. And if you don't have to worry about World War II songs, he says, that's all we know, because we're all vets.
Huh.
And he said, we call ourselves the Iowa City River Rats. Oh boy. He said, if this is agreeable with you, he said, you just sign it that you want us there, and we'll be there at 7 o'clock on the date that we want them in there. And cost you $300. That was the contract.
Okay.
So it got to be 6:30, nobody showed up. 20 minutes to 7. Ground looking up, and I went over and there was 5 of them, I think. 5 of the piano players, but I don't remember now. Anyway, I got a bottle of beer for each one of them, and they played right straight through to 12:30. And we get them beer, and we sang and laughed, had more fun. But this guy said the reason he didn't answer because he was in a veterans hospital down in Des Moines, and he was having some surgery done.
Oh.
But Iowa City River. I was just about ready to kill that hostess down there. We'd made the deal, and the guys still talk about how much fun we had. Not a sheet of music. They just played.
By ear.
Yeah. Well, they knew their stuff. But then they asked for requests, and we sing. And then this my other family. That's what it amounts to. Then of course, we got the male family too. We go to, we don't near as much now since I retired, but we go to national conventions and state conventions of mail carriers, and this used to be part of the old 3rd Congressional District here, and they've changed it. Now, the carriers they split Iowa in 6 parts, and we're in the North Central District now. But we just, it's family too. Everybody's around them so much, and ate with them.
Oh, yeah.
Stayed
We
at their
worked there a
house.
lot of years.
Yeah.
So. Well, that's good. I mean, it gives you a chance to have a lot of friends all over.